The Rock of Gibraltar. Standing at the entrance of the Mediterranean is a monolith of limestone. At 426 meters, it rises majestically over the straits. In the present day, Gibraltar is a flourishing modern city with a population of 30,000 coming and going, living their daily lives. Unbeknownst to many, a vast and complex group of caves crisscrosses the inside of the rock, formed over millennia by the elements that have battered the mighty stone. With 214 officially recorded sites, Gibraltar has one of the highest concentrations of caves in the world for its size. Full of intrigue, wonder, and natural beauty, these natural hollows offer an opening to another way of seeing the rock, an underground Gibraltar. Many of Gibraltar's caves have been naturally accessible to humans. They sit at our seashores or can be reached via narrow ledges on the cliffs of the Rock of Gibraltar. Many caves, however, have lain undisturbed, having been created by the erosion of rainwater over millennia, forming hollow bubbles deep within the rock. One can imagine that the inside of the rock is peppered with dozens of undiscovered caves with no access to the surface, which will remain locked away deep in the limestone. At the beginning of the 20th century, British military engineers were blasting tunnels deep into the western slopes of the Rock of Gibraltar for use as a magazine. As the project neared completion, the final few blasts revealed a large cave system with no natural entrance from the surface. After driving to the end of the road tunnel, the team of speleologists from the Gibraltar Museum Caving Unit travelled deeper into the Ragged Staff Cave system.
So we've just entered the system known as Ragged Staff Cave, also known as Crystal Cave. We've just driven through a tunnel. It's a tunnel which is built for vehicular access. And we've climbed up these steps in order to gain access to one of the entry points of the cave. So Ragged Staff Cave is the largest cave system in Gibraltar. Most people think about St. Michael's Cave being the largest, but this isn't true. We'll see as we negotiate the different chambers and the different passages throughout the cave, and we'll point out different features as we go along. Just come in through the tunnel in order to access the cave. And we can see it's a tunnel because there's a lot of blasting that's happened in the area, there's a lot of rubble on the ground, and you can see some of the drill holes used to actually blast this tunnel through. So we're at the point that we're transitioning from man-made tunnel into natural cave. We're now in the first large chamber of Ragged Staff Cave. Behind me you can see a small pool. The water line has not always been at that level. I mean, at the moment it's about 15 meters below me, but about 15 meters above me, so 20 meters above the present water level, we can see what we call a notch, or basically it's a notch in the limestone which has been dug out by the water, not by water action like you would see in marine caves, because here there would be no wave action at all. But that's basically the level where the surface of the water interacts with the outside, and it basically just eats away at the limestone. And that's called a phreatic zone. And you can see it quite clearly where the waterline would have been in the past.
Having been completely protected by the elements, pollution and human intervention, the cave has been allowed over millennia to form some stunning and massive formations.
So we've arrived here in the Rhino chamber of Ragged Staff Cave. This is the largest chamber inside this cave system. And we've got here by climbing up the flowstone. We've ascended about 40 meters in order to reach here. And the geology around this cavern is typical of a solutional cave. Behind me you can see some cave formations known as drapes or curtains. And these are typically created or formed by the passage of water into the cavern, percolating through the limestone, depositing the calcite deposits onto the rock and creating these very large and aesthetically pleasing formations.
Amongst the large towering stalactites and stalagmites, there are smaller, more fragile formations known as helictites, which seem to defy gravity and grow out in different directions, forming twisted and warped fingers of stone.
As the cave gets narrower, while we get to the bottom of the cave, we can see a lot of these formations called straws. These are basically how stalactites are born. It's just one drop of water slowly filtering down, depositing the calcite remains in it. As we go down, we'll be very careful not to knock these with our hard hats, because they're very fragile and they can break and basically stop the formation from going.
Although Ragged Staff Cave is a solutional cave, with most of it formed by the action of rainwater, there are several fissures within the cave system that were cracked open by earthquakes due to tectonic movement. This is therefore an example of a hybrid cave, where different natural processes have contributed to the creation of the cavern we enjoy today.
Behind me we can see another ancient water line. At the moment this is quite dry, there's no water body here at all, but that line clearly defines where the surface of the pool would have been at the time, and the white walls basically is the calcite deposit that the water was leaving behind on the cave wall there.
The long and elegant form of some of these cave formations, colloquially referred to as drapes or curtains, can make beautiful percussive sounds which resonate within the large chambers of the cave when struck.
Behind me we can see some rather white stalagmites. These are very different in colour to other stalagmites and stalactites in this cave and in other caves in Gibraltar. Normally they have more of an orangey brownish colouring. This is due to the fact that in this part of the cave there's more of a filtration process, so the water that arrives in this part of the cave has been filtered and is pure calcite, giving this sort of shiny white appearance. A closer look at these formations reveals the crystalline structure that they have. This is partly why the cave is also known as Crystal Cave.
Some of the cave formations, created by the slow dripping of rainwater, crystallize in a way that give them a translucent quality which glow by torchlight, producing some beautiful hues. As the caving unit continues their journey, traversing the many narrow passages within the cave, we begin to appreciate how it also came to be known as Crystal Cave. At this point, we are greeted with a surreal and almost magical sight of thousands of delicate sparkling crystals, thinner than human hair. These were formed by the interaction between the natural minerals within the rock with air and water under very special circumstances.
These small and fine crystals behind me are one of the reasons why Ragged Staff Cave is also known as Crystal Cave. These tiny crystals form by evaporation. The general term for these type of crystals is called evaporites, which is self-explanatory. They can be made out of various minerals. The most probable one here would be aragonite. The curious thing here is that they're actually black in colour, even though they're growing out of a white rock formation. So in this part of the cave we can see some more white formations. In this case they're not actually formed by crystals the same as the stalagmites that we saw earlier, but these are actually white in colour because they've ceased to be fed by a water supply above. So they start to become quite white in colour, very brittle. These are actually very dangerous to attach any anchoring equipment from. Caves can actually give us a lot of information about our distant past. In particular, this cave, Ragged Staff Cave, has been studied to research the past climates that Gibraltar has experienced. They can also tell us a lot about the tectonic movements of what has been happening in terms of plate tectonics in the area. This formation in particular, you have a stalagmite at the bottom, stalactite at the top. The stalactite normally feeds the stalagmite and makes it grow, but in this case you can see that it's being displaced. The bottom of the stalactite coming from the top doesn't actually line up with the stalagmites growing from the bottom. This tells us that the actual base of the cave, so the actual ground, has actually been moved during tectonic movements, seismic events.
So we are now here on the chamber following on from Rhino Chamber. We've had to traverse a narrow passage to reach this location, and today this is the extent of what we'll be doing. It's interesting to note that on a previous occasion we've actually explored further, and we've had to negotiate like a sort of fissure with a body of water. We've managed to swim across a tight area, and then it opens up into a cavern with a sort of beach, which is quite interesting, and it opens up the possibility to explore that location further.
The Gibraltar Museum Caving Unit have recently been exploring many of the uncharted passages within this cave system, but much of it still remains unexplored. Nevertheless, the areas we have already visited have allowed us to behold some of the rock's most spectacular natural marvels deep underground.